How is everybody doing today? My name is Daryl. I'm with Agorapulse. Thank you for joining us. If this is your first time, well, maybe rephrase that. If you're a regular watcher, consumer, viewer, participant in our phenomenal webinar content here, you may notice I am in a different location. Behind me is the great outdoors. That is not a green screen. This is the real deal. The trees move. I can touch that. Look at that. It's so cool. But this is the exciting point about today's session. Because we're doing it live and outdoors, which if you're wondering, it was the best place to get Wi-Fi at my dad's house. Well, it doesn't look terrible. We're going to see how many people walk behind me, make fun of me, stop and stare at me. I'm sure that would be way more entertaining than the final actual content. So welcome to the show. Welcome to real life. And it's going to be a phenomenal session as we talk about how savvy marketers can turn economic downturns into growth gold. So if you're like me, I've been through this a few times. You know the drill. If you're like me, you know that this can be scary. I could be at risk. It's in my control a fair amount if I take the right steps now. But, you know, if I come out the other side, I'm going to be a 2X, 3X marketer because I will have been a marketer in good times and I will have been a marketer in bad times, and how I market changes dramatically. If you're not like me, this is your first time facing this situation. Breathe. Just breathe. Just don't panic. Don't have anxiety. The best thing when you're in a stressful situation, we all kind of have a tendency to do this, is to take control, right? You want to take control and feel like you are in control of your own destiny. Well, to do that, you kind of got to have a game plan. And that's what today's conversation is all about. It's all about having a game plan. It's also about actually, as we're saying, you can turn this into actually gold. Out of lemons can come lemonade. Isn't that crazy stuff? So we're going to have that conversation today. Now, as you know, I'm just the pretty face, and some would argue that we must have a low budget if this is the pretty face definition. I get it. I understand. I'm joined by two incredibly smart, gifted, capable, experience means old. You'll see that when you see Judd. Judd is like really old. Capable individuals who are going to join us today. They've been on this journey before, and they have shared yet unique experiences. So first up, I mentioned Judd Borakov. Now, Judd, is it Borakov or Borakov? I got to ask you that. What is it?
Borakov.
Borakov. Okay, that's good.
I got the white, Daryl. I'm chasing you, though.
So funny story. I went and got my hair cut earlier today, Judd. So before that, and so as you can tell, I have product in my hair. For those wondering how this hair stays, there's product, guys. And when I do that, I put the product in, my hair darkens. So earlier today, before I had my haircut, I knew I was getting my haircut. So I put no product in my hair this morning, and my team gets on the call with me, and they were like, who the hell are you? Because I have like super white hair when there's no product. And it was flat. I looked like a Beatles from the 60s. It was a mop top. So boys and girls who were not around in that era, the Beatles was a band. They were kind of famous. We'll leave it there.
Most people won't know what it is.
Yes, exactly. Who are they? I don't know.
Like Beatles in your background, or what's going on?
Exactly. There's Beatles back here. Is that what you mean, Darren? So Judd is an operating partner of GDM Partners, but Judd also is a recruiter and has been a recruiter for years of executives. So we're going to learn more about GTM Partners in a section, but you're going to see his experience on the GTM side, the go-to-market side, and his experience on the recruiting side is going to come to play because both of these things are factors when you're trying to make gold in an economic downturn. Joining him, his partner in kind, Sangram Vajre, the partner at GTM Partners as well. They work together. This is crazy stuff. Former CMO, co-founder of Terminus. He's a rock star author of multiple books. Check him out on Amazon.com. I'm a big, big, big fan of the most recent book called Move. And Move is all about go to market. It has a whole framework there. You see the tie-in, GTM Partners, go to market, move, work it all out, boys and girls. You got to read the book. It is must-read reading for any marketer out there. It's Sangram Vajre. Sangram is epic. He appears on all the fancy magazines and on all the cool stages. Sangram, welcome to the show, my friend.
All right. Well, I need to get those magazines because I have not seen those, but that's all good.
Now, one of the things you may not know this. I made mention of this. Sangram and Judd co-founded Peak Community, P-E-A-K community, right? So Peak Community, as I mentioned, is a community for CMOs and aspiring emerging CMOs. It's a phenomenal place. Sangram, what's the website address if someone wants to check it out? And how do I become a member?
All right. So it's called peak.community. It's not .com. It's peak.community. And if you go to that, you won't be able to sign up. We did that on purpose. You cannot sign up on peak.community. The only way to get into this community is to find somebody who is in the community. So that's why you need to know. You have to network. You need to know who the marketers are, who the emerging CMOs are, and CMOs that need to be there. Those are the people who get to be in the community. So the best way to do that, go to LinkedIn, find Peak Community, see who follows it, and see if you can find somebody and get a code to get in. It's a secret code.
It's a secret code. Now, here's another angle. If you can't do that, if you're already connected with me on LinkedIn, Daryl Prale, just send me a message. I can hook you up. If you're not, you could get connected with me, and then I could send you a connection request, an invite request to Peak. Just a trick. Don't tell Sangram or Judd that I told you that, but that's another way of doing it. So, all right, let's get this party started. We are in an interesting dynamic time, so much so, see how I'm going to segue here in you folks, that the group at Peak Community is actually doing an event about the exact same topic from a different point of view. Taking place on Friday, September 9th, Sangram's going to hang out with Gary Service, and they're going to talk about, get this, mission critical. 5 areas emerging CMOs and CMOs should take action ahead of a potential downturn. And this is a venture capitalist perspective, an investor's perspective. So that's a complementary session, very much from a content and knowledge point of view to what we're going to have today. And if you want to watch that, it's free if you're a member of Peak. So that's the push for Peak. Okay. With that said, first slide that we have up here is what is keeping our stakeholders up at night. Now, when I say stakeholders, for every marketer out there, if your initial thought is maybe your sales counterpart, or maybe the person in charge of pay-per-click, or maybe you, or maybe your CMO, that is not who I mean. When I say stakeholders, I mean the venture capitalists, the investors. I mean the CFO. I mean the CEO. I mean the head of HR. What is keeping stakeholders up at night? Now, Sangram, you've been involved in multiple startups that have blown up and gone huge, massive success. And in the process of that, you've enjoyed these wonderful downturns in the economy. Who are the stakeholders typically that you think a marketer should become best friends with in these turbulent times?
Oh man, I think the usual suspects for a lot of people is their chief revenue officer. A lot of times, because they end up becoming the person that they reach out to, or they reach out to them and saying, I need this or that. But the real person that should be the best friend, if you are trying to be a good CMO, a lasting CMO, someone who actually can change the budget and have impact and get ahead of the cuts, is your CFO. That's the person you need to have more conversations with. And Daryl, it's amazing that how few CMOs or how emerging CMOs, how few of them actually talk to the CFO or even know who the CFO is or have had one-on-one conversations with it. They are the one. You need them best friends.
So I remember the first time you and I met Sangram, and we were on a webinar together, I think, and we were talking about when you start a new job, who are the key people as a CMO you need to get, ingratiate yourself with right away. And I think you and I are both bonded on the fact that we had the same point of view, but it wasn't a commonly held point of view. I said the head of finance and the head of HR. And I think you were nodding your head like, yeah, high five, for the various reasons you said, because the head of finance controls your budget. The head of HR is what allows you to build your team, expand your team, or you're going to either reduce your team or help defend keeping of your team, especially in a downtime economy. Judd, let me ask you this. When you're recruiting CMO candidates, who are the stakeholders who have a vocal or strong influence in the candidate shortlist? Is it just the CEO, or are there other candidates?
What we find, especially the interview process, it's going to be obviously CEO, but generally you're bringing in your CRO. You want to make sure that there's that connection between the two. They can work well together. Normally there's also going to be board. They want board buy-in. It might be all one of the members. That's definitely going to be a component of that interviewing process. And I'll say the other stakeholders are the people who are going to report to that CMO. Generally the VPs or directors that are already working there and functioning to make sure, one, there's a connection, two, that they have that ability to kind of work together in a way that's going to drive the result they're looking for. So those are really the big ones, at least in that process.
Okay. So folks listening, there you go. These are the stakeholders. These are the people that you need to make sure that you are completely aligned with. If not for this job, then definitely for your next job if you're a casualty of the current economy. And I'm saying that and I'm laughing. I'm not trying to laugh. I'm trying to be a little bit, honest with everybody here. It happens. The one thing I always have told my friends, my wife, my parents, when they say, wow, you're a CMO, way to go. And I said, what you don't understand is that means I probably have the highest salary in the marketing team. And that also means in a down economy, I'm the first person they evaluate letting go because it's the biggest savings they can have to impact positively their operating, expenses, to reduce that spend. So you have to be cognizant of that. As a CMO, you're here for a season. More than likely, I think what I saw was the median tenure recently was 24 months. So
that's on the high side. So that's on the high side in some cases. One thing that I would add, what Judd just said about board is so important. I hope it's not lost on people. Board is even further away from all of your day-to-day conversations. And some of the best CMOs, some of the best leaders have made those relationships. Your board actually wants to help. They want to know what's going on. They actually are the one who can place you for the next big role in some other company that might need some up-and-coming one or some changes, whatever that happens. A lot of people don't spend time with board at all. Most people don't even know who's on the board. And just like the CFO is a distant person that you feel like, maybe I'll talk to the person that need it. Board is another one. You're like, well, I'll get to them when we need it. No. These are the people that you really need to put the time and ask your CEO, who is one of our board members that is interested in marketing. And they would quickly say, yeah, this guy, Daryl, he's on the board. He always asks marketing question. Can I spend time with him? Do you think that person would mentor me to be a better leader? 9 out of 10 times, the answer is going to be yeah, unless you're threatening to the CMO or CEO. They're going to say, yeah, go do that. And that actually would help you stabilize and see further from what the company needs. Because the board is thinking about not this quarter, they're looking at the category, they're looking at the next year, the following year. So you get to have a conversation that is way more informed than you could at the round table that you might be sitting in your company.
All right. So one of the things that I love, Sangam just used one specific word that I thought was very, very powerful. I don't know if you caught it. Use the word relationships. All right. So this is all sideways to a CMO and up, right? So if you're not actively communicating that way, previously in a good economy, boys and girls, get off your behinds and do it now. Because when they're having those hard decisions, which is, remember, they have a fiduciary responsibility to drill down and examine the numbers and examine the results and figure out how to navigate this tough time because they're trying to honor the investments that have been made, right? So based on that, you better make sure you have your relationships intact. So that is actually, believe it or not, it may sound negative, but in fact, that's a growth thing because exactly as you just said, and exactly as Judd just said, those same people you have a relationship with are going to help propel you to your next gig if you do it right. So that's growth. That's good.
One addition to that.
Yeah, go ahead.
People tend to think of their network only when they need them. You should be thinking about networking as the way that you're going to achieve your goals, and it should be an always-on thing. So I know a lot of people go heads down at their jobs. They do a really good job of that, but they don't build their network. They need it at some point, and then they try to build it, and it's too late. So definitely, if I could give one point of focus for people is build your network throughout your entire career and keep it going.
It's so funny. I've given both my kids that exact same advice over and over and over again. I'm like, most recently I had a conversation with my oldest child and they were like, where do I go next in my career? I'm here. How do I get to, I think I want to go there, but I'm not quite sure. And I'm like, well, who are the people between here and there that influence directly or indirectly that evolution? Well, and he rhymes them all off. I said, great. Are you connected with them on LinkedIn, for example? No. I said, okay, dude, that's the starting point. And then you start developing a relationship with that and they will actually help you achieve your goal. But you always need to have that network building, because you never know when you're going to need it. And it's so true. And trust me, when you lose your job, you need it. So there we go. Okay. Let's talk about one of the things, carrying on with the stakeholder conversation that we're having, whether it be the CRO, the CFO, the CEO, or the investors. One of the things that they do is they refocus their priorities in a changing economy. And they kind of do that two ways. They do it, one, on the revenue side, and the other one, they do it kind of in the business at large. And we'll go into more detail on that one. But on the revenue side, I would love to know your thoughts on this, both of you gentlemen, because you both have been involved in this, because you both have run businesses and you both have worked with a lot of major investors and power brokers. They start looking deep and hard at a couple things I've found. Your funnel health. In other words, what's your MQL volume like? What's your customer acquisition trending like? Maybe before a high CAC was okay, but now times are not so good and we have less money and the high customer acquisition cost is less tolerable. They start looking at your bookings versus your demos, just those conversion rates. They start looking at your conversion rates of every step along the journey. They start looking at how's your average selling price trending up, trending down. They look at things like, where are we at on our ARR targets? Are we going to hit them? We're going to miss it, because we have to be looking out, because, if we have to adjust, it's going to take us at least 1 to 2 quarters to absorb some of those costs before we can right size the ship. So we're always looking that far out. What have you guys seen with those stakeholders in mind? Are there revenue numbers that you see over and over again they're studying that many marketers are oblivious to?
Well, and John, I think you know already where I'm going with this one.
Of course.
Because this happened in the peak community conversation. Daryl, you probably heard that too. We had Yamini Rangan, CEO of HubSpot, on the for an interview, and I asked her, like, what is the one metric? What is the one metric that you care about that is the most important to you? And again, HubSpot is a publicly traded company, SaaS business. What is the one metric that you care about? And she said, NRR. Now, most people listening to this is like probably, you're Googling or trying to figure out what is NRR, and that's a problem because your CEO cares about it, your board cares about it, so you need to know. It's the net revenue retention rate, right? So ultimately, NRR shows the health of the business, shows are we keeping customers, are we expanding existing customers and getting more value, and if you don't have that, then actually it's not a healthy business. You're getting a lot more people, but you're losing at the same rate or higher rate, and that's what happens to companies, that they run out of customers, they run out of money, and that's when you start losing businesses. So NRR, that's the metric, and go figure what funnel are you going to use to get NRR. You can't look at a demand waterfall funnel if you new sales decisions, or topo double funnel if you're looking at that. You can't look at those and say, give me NRR. How do I look at NRR? It's only going to show leads come in. Here's how I assign people to SDR or AE, and we're trying to close the deal. Like, that's the start and the end of it. Well, what about NRR? How do you think about customers? How do you think about product-led growth? How do you think about all the different ways companies go to market and then find a way to get to NRR? To me, that is one thing where good marketers are going to become great.
Well, one thing to add there, so prior to NRR is also great when you have customers. Earlier stage, newer product offerings, you're also looking at GRR, so your gross versus your net. So there you're going to look at, your retention. Do we have a leaky sieve? Are we losing people faster than we're getting them? Or are we getting enough that we can keep building and create more overarching ARR? So both of those are extremely important. And you're going to see that NRR these days tend to be a gold standard, though. So it's something you definitely want to know.
So then, Jed, let me ask you this question. Again, when you're recruiting those senior marketers, and maybe it's a CMO, maybe it's a VP marketing, maybe it's a director level. Do you test them at all? I'm just curious. Now I'm just being nosy. Do you kind of poke and prod at their knowledge, their awareness, their grasp of all the typical financial, acronyms out there? And if so, what generalizations can you share with us?
Well, we definitely talk through a lot of that. It helps to bring out their experience and their focuses and how they work with the executive team. Definitely financial components come into play for sure. I will say, as of late, NRR conversations and truly go-to-market conversations are becoming more and more prevalent. But what I'm finding, even on the marketing side, a lot of marketing leaders don't understand them. They don't know how to go-to-market actually functions fully. Those that do seem to be really just climbing fast. They understand the business metrics. They understand how the business objectives tie into their goals and how they're going to operate against them. Those are the ones that always get me the most excited. They generally are the best interviews. They really understand the soup to nuts. They understand that as a CMO, they're coming in and their job, really, they're a business owner. They're not a marketing owner, right? And there's a differentiation there. And that's where those metrics really start coming into play, where they say, I've got a business objective, and what I have to create or move towards that is marketing. They don't look at it as, I've got marketing, how do I make marketing better? So that's a big shift that actually occurs, and that's where those go-to-market conversations become very telling.
Okay, so here's the takeaway, folks. If you've been avoiding becoming an expert, shall we say, at all those financial acronyms because it's just not your thing, you're much more focused on paid media or video or social or whatever it might be. If you truly want to grow or even survive this situation where we find ourselves in right now, you need to become a master of those. It's really not hard. You don't need to be an accountant. You just need to understand what are the acronyms, why do they matter to you, how do you measure it? And what you're going to find is what you understand that will dramatically shift how you approach your own go-to-market strategy. Now, Judd also talked about go-to-market. I made a mention of this earlier. I'm going to circle back to it. He talks about when he's talking to candidates, if they understand go-to-market, it really gets them excited. The thing about go-to-market historically is that it's been a very intangible thing. Lots of opinions, but it's kind of like, how can you define it? There's been a few books in my personal career that have impacted me. Very few. Like I can list them on one hand, probably on three fingers. One of the ones early on in my career was Crossing the Chasm, Jeffrey Moore. And the whole idea of, the chasm and the bowling alley or the bowling pin, etc. If you haven't read that book, read that book. One of the books that just recently came out, I mentioned, was Move. And the reason that impacted me so dramatically was because Sangram and Brian, the two authors of the book, physically created a framework to get rid of that intangible aspect. And so you as a marketer can follow the framework once you position where you are in your go-to-market maturity and actually use that to navigate whether it's a new company in good times or a company's trying to survive the less than good times. All right. So go read that. When you combine the data, the financial metrics with the go-to-market framework, it's going to rock your world, but you're going to be able to have conversations with those people who are this way and this way that are going to build the relationships and is going to blow their mind. And that's all about growth, which is the topic of today's topic. So those are some really, really, really key things. I'm not saying that to blow smoke up their butt. In fact, this is the reason these two gentlemen are here today, because they know of what they talk. Now, the last thing I want to talk about on changing priorities that stakeholders care about, we talked about the revenue. The other part is just the business at large. So you already heard them talk a little bit about retention, right? So we talk about churn, NRR, gross, GRR. You see those things. That changes dramatically. So let me ask you this, Sangram, when you've been in this cycle before, how much has your historical investment, whether it be in people or in budget, shifted from new customer acquisition to retention while you endure this little hiccup of a slow economy?
Oh man. So I'll tell you in Terminus when we had the GRR issue that Judd talked about, where we had new customers come in, we were able to do great marketing, and a lot of people listening right now, you might be amazing marketers, you might be able to create amazing buzz and noise, and you get people in, and you can't keep them. And they say things like, "Oh, we love you, but we can't show ROI of the product," and then they buzz off. And now you're left with, okay, the leaky bucket that a lot of people talk about. And when I see all that thing, it really what comes down to is that ultimately what you need to make are hard decisions around business, not happy decisions. Like great business is not built on happy decisions. The only happy decision you can make is where you want to go for lunch or dinner or something like that with your group. Those are happy decisions. The hard decisions are, what do I invest? Do we hire another marketer, or do we actually hire an SDR, or do we do partnership? What is the go-to-market decision that you need to make? That really is at the heart of all of this. It's everything else you can get around, you can figure things out, but I think that's the part. So we use a rallying cry internally. We call it retention is the new acquisition. We got the entire company to rally around this idea that, look, retention is the new acquisition. So if we don't hit quote unquote revenue goals of this, That's okay. That's okay if you don't have 200 more customers, but it's not okay to lose 50 customers. It's not okay. Like, that's not going to happen. So we change our metrics. We change our comp plan for the sales team. We change our comp plan for our customer success team. And that change literally took about 3 quarters to have this whole thing swing around. It took time. It really took time. There were a lot of hard decisions. We're like, we're not going after this market. We're going to go after stay in this lane and retain more. Stay in this lane, retain more. It was really, really hard. But great companies, I think, at the end of the day, make hard decisions, not happy decisions.
All right. So a couple things here. Folks, if you're listening, we're talking here about how stakeholders think. You need to know this. I can't emphasize this enough. You need to know this as a senior member of the marketing crew, or if you aspire to that role. The more you can do that now, the faster your career is going to take off. You need to know that. So they look at how do we shift our investments, right? And what do we prioritize? I'm just talking about that. The other thing they look at is conserving cash. We actually haven't used that term today, but it's a very, very common expression. And what that means is, how do we spend less? And think of it as a household budget, right? If all of a sudden my expenses are going up, but my income is staying the same, I have to reduce somewhere, right? I was just talking to one of my employees. He just came back from 2 weeks vacation. And I said, how was it, man? What'd you do? And he said, well, we kind of stayed by the house. I said, oh, yeah. Is that what you normally do? Because normally we go to visit, my dad for a week, and then we go somewhere on a trip as a family for the second week. But expenses have gone up. Food is more, fuel's more, etc. So we had to stay around for 2 weeks. I visited my dad, then I stayed home. We did not go on the trip. They conserve cash. So business, home, exact same thing. Here's the thing that you need to understand as a marketer. Conserving cash is a 2-forked approach. I can conserve cash by cutting people, layoffs, or I can conserve cash by cutting program spend, campaign spend. Now, here's the tricky thing. If you don't know, they never tell you. They always, always, always default initially to cutting program spend because nobody likes to cut people. That can often be a mistake. Judd, Sangram, what are your thoughts on that? Ever lived this? And if so, how have you dealt with it?
Well, I will say we're already seeing a lot of this now. Right now, and with potential risk where right now I don't feel like we've hit the real economic downturn to date, but people are getting very antsy. So we're actually seeing program and people being cut. So it comes down to kind of investment mapping. The way I kind of look at it is like, how are we investing? What are we going to invest in? What can we not invest in? If they're doing it right, I find that there's a lot less, we'll call it head cutting, because they're actually looking at where the value is and what they have to spend on it and how they're going to get through this economic time. But I find that a lot of companies are not good at it. They don't take the time to go back and look at all the metrics. And I will say, and Sangram is the biggest proponent of this, is RevOps is the new thing. It's because you need to know your numbers. You need to know where all of the things are coming from. You've got to have that central source of truth to make these types of hard decisions. And that's why we're seeing a huge, huge growth in that RevOps area. So that's what we're seeing. That's what we see time over time. But the smart companies that know their stuff, you're seeing less layoffs, maybe a reduction in spend in certain areas, but they're calculated reductions. They're not just slashing to try to get a runway.
Yeah, the part that's interesting in this is what's coming back is what should always be there, which is the idea of efficient growth. And we've talked about this in Peak as well. And what I'm hearing in all the board meetings that I'm lately in is that you're conserving cash. Another way to say that is we need to grow, but we need to go efficiently. And I'm like, okay, well, great. So what were we doing until now? We were growing carelessly is the answer. We were growing at all costs is the answer. We were trying to land grab and keep moving and get investors to put money in so we can actually hire more like crazy, not without a plan. That was what's happening. And now we're going back to, no, we need to go efficiently. So we have to now go on the other extreme of it where we're going to hold everything and then you have to give a business case for doing even the right things. So we're going from one end of the spectrum to another. And all around where really the foundation of all of this is that every company that is going to be a good, lasting company will actually have the foundation found in efficient growth. If you can do that, and if you can stay congruent to that, and you're going to not try and go crazy because somebody else did it, I think that's where lasting companies are. So right now, where Judd, as you mentioned, we are in the middle of it. It might go worse. It might be okay. It might stay. But what we all need to do is to figure out how do we help our organization to grow efficiently. When you use that word in a board meeting, or you tell that that's what I'm thinking, everybody's going to say, wow, okay, you're thinking on the side of the company.
I love that. Use those words, and all those stakeholders you talked about earlier will think, wow, you're thinking about the company, which will give you personal growth and runway. So what do we say here? We said we need you to understand all the financial metrics you didn't understand, because you're going to need to defend whether it's a program spend or a people spend, because it's all about conserving cash. But we still want to grow. We just want to grow efficiently. So if we understand, we measure our results by those, all those KPIs, and we understand the new reality of spend. We may have smaller budgets, we may have smaller people, but we still want to grow. We want to grow efficiently. Then the next step is to do exactly what these two fine gentlemen are talking about, which is get at the data. And so that's all about using data to do what we call getting success savvy, right? So if you want to be successful, you remember how I said you hated being the financial person? That's not your strength. You'd rather focus on pay-per-click. Now I'm going to ask you to be a data scientist. Growth isn't always just accolades and pay raises and awards. Growth is sometimes flexing those muscles that you haven't flexed before. Financial, now data. How can you make a decision? How can you do go-to-market? How can you grow efficiently? You need to go to your wonderful little CRM or your marketing automation or both, and you need to start looking at the data. And you need to know your numbers inside and out. And it's not just at like the customer acquisition cost or the net retention. You need to drill down, and you need to understand, what is my MQL rate? What's my MQL to SQL conversion? What are my conversion rates at every step along the way? What is my I mentioned customer acquisition cost, but what's my customer acquisition cost by channel? All right. Can I prove that I am returning an ROI on the marketing spend I make? And that spend could be program, or it could be people, but usually it's both, right? And here's the funny part, is that most marketers I know suck, absolutely suck at knowing their own numbers. Yet if you're being asked to invest, to grow efficiently and conserve cash, same thing. How can you make an informed decision? There's a really good example that we see here at Agorapulse all the time. We see that marketers do not know the ROI on their social media investment. But here's the interesting thing. This is not a Agorapulse statement. This is a HubSpot statement. HubSpot presented a survey, and they said, here's 17 ways you can spend your money, different channels, pay-per-click, whatever. Marketers, prioritize how you spend that. Number one was social media. And I challenge any marketer out here to say to me, how did your social media drive revenue? Now, I'm not saying this for Agorapulse. I'm saying if you can't answer that, you're in trouble, like in a big ass way. But if you can answer that amongst all the other aspects we just talked about, then you're in a really good situation. I'm curious, Sangram, what do you see? Like and actually, even go to Judd before I go to Sangram. Judd, you just said RevOps is kind of like the new, cat's meow, the new king. Is that why? Because of this? Are marketers finally starting to see it? Or are marketers delegating to RevOps and still wanting to ignore it and just let the boys, and girls figure that out, and we'll give them a pizza once in a while? Like, what's going on there?
I think that the biggest reason that we're seeing this influx is, and anybody who's been in the room before with sales, marketing, and all the other players realize that everybody likes to point fingers, especially when they really don't know their numbers or don't understand the data. And instead of having infighting between sales who says it's marketing's fault, marketing says it's sales' fault, everybody's pointing at CS and saying they're not doing their job, you have a central source of truth where all of the data comes. And now we have a group that tells us what's really happening so we can make the right informed decisions. No more their fault, our fault, which makes the business just run much more smooth. So I will say, one of the other stakeholders you want to know is whoever's running your RevOps, make them a real good friend.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, there's an old book that I think each one of us read, and hopefully people need to read again, called Who Moves My Cheese? And I think that's what happens. Who moved my cheese? And people are looking for the cheese, and the cheese is somewhere else. And then until you find the cheese, it's somebody else's fault. And that's what happens a lot of times. And we see right now, if everybody's experiencing this, sales number goes down. What happens? The head of sales is gone, or marketing is cut. So if the customers are churning, if CS is not working, we need a new leader in CS. And we all are trying to fix this problem as if it's isolated. And if you really take a step back, what I want to submit to you and what we have been doing in our research through the book and what we found, it's typically never a marketing problem alone. It's never a sales problem alone. It's never a CS problem alone. This actually ends up becoming the go-to-market problem. Maybe because you're not having customers come in because you have a messaging problem. It also could be that your sales people are not able to close deals. It also could be that your CS people are not able to convert them and get them to buy differently. All of those are all actual go-to-market problems. So before you actually lay off people in those roles, because you think that every time I change people, all of a sudden the numbers are automatically going to go up and to the right, which is literally a dream, and it doesn't happen, which is why the 24 months, 12 months is the tenure of CMOs and others. Because changing people never, almost seldom, I should say, that changes the outcome. What changes is when you as a leadership team has what we call CAT, clarity, alignment, and team mindset. You're clear where you need to go. Everybody on the team is understanding where we need to go. They're aligned because alignment is better than being right. We have all the times we hear this people that we want, so everybody might be right. But as a team, if you're not aligned, you're going in the wrong direction. You're going in so many different directions. No matter what, if it's right, it doesn't matter. You might be alone on the right direction. And then if you don't have your team together, then you don't have the people, the right set of folks that will actually get there. So if you can have clarity, alignment, and team together, 9 out of 10 times, you're going to go find a good destination.
All right. So let's run with that. If you want the clarity, it's simply you're going to get the direction from your stakeholders on, what is the goal? Is it efficient growth? What are the numbers that are we adjusting our targets? Whatever it might be. If it's profitability, it's market share, if it's customer acquisition costs, whatever it might be, you will need clarity on those numbers. And you're driving your team to achieve those numbers. All right. You want alignment. And by the way, that's going to rock a lot of team because a lot of them are like, hey, look at how much engagement, likes and shares got on the social post, or hey, we appeared on this cool website. Nothing happened, but we appeared on it. Isn't that cool? All right. So you need clarity. Second part is you need alignment. Okay. And this is where the data comes in. So if I need to get these goals, I grow efficiently, maybe I want to reduce my customer acquisition costs, maybe I want to hit certain, net retention numbers, whatever it might be, you got to figure that out. You need to study all your numbers, right? So for example, maybe you need to increase the MQL to SQL conversion, which means maybe then I need to actually do a better job lead scoring so I can get a better quality lead so I can have a better conversion rate. But I really don't know how to do the lead scoring, so maybe I need to go back to my attribution model and refine that a little bit. All of this is data. And then you start to see how you draw for them. Here's the clarity. Here's the alignment. We're going to align on these metrics, these improvements, these initiatives. And we're going to do it as a team by holding each other accountable for their role in it. And that becomes even more important when your team becomes smaller because they're conserving cash. Sangram, when you've gone through this, are there certain operational metrics you and your teams have really focused on, like this at this granular level to drive those high-end, KPIs?
Yeah, and they would change based on the stage of the company and what you want. But the two metrics that come to mind that we see it over and over, and I've seen tremendous amount of need for CAT, clarity, alignment, and team, and the metrics that actually drive many times the rest of the metric, NRR, how is it driven by, are really these two. One is pipeline velocity. How quickly can I move the deals forward? How quickly can I make those deals bigger? Like if I can change that outcome, 1 or 2 or 3% on change in that is huge, which is why RevOps can help there. Enablement teams can help there. Like it's not just sales enablement, like enable employee, customer, sales enablement across the board. It's really, really important. It's pipeline velocity. The second win is really customer time to value. If your customers can see the ROI of your product or service within the first 30 days, you're in a different ballgame. Now you know they're going to stick with you. Now you know they're going to get with you and stay longer with you. It supports, again, the GRR, NRR, all of those things. So I think that these are the two metrics that very few marketers, again, think about as a key where their bonuses will be based on that or what they need to be focused on. But if you can figure out a way to get your pipeline to move faster, and if you can figure out a way to make the ROI for your customer quicker, you're actually in a complete new ballgame.
You kind of got me thinking there in one direction. I got to ask Judd a question, and maybe the answer is no, Daryl, you're stupid, which is a common answer. Do you see the variable component of a marketer's pay change in a downward economy? In other words, when times are good, your variable component is MRR or ARR. But when it's times are bad and we need to grow efficiently, there are more granular numbers. What are you seeing as far as incentives or vehicles or salary structures to drive this kind of behavior when the economy is slowing down?
One of the things we see for sure, and Daryl, yeah, you're wrong, you're stupid, just kidding. But one of the things we see for sure is a big shift. So as the economy slows, as people get a little, uncomfortable with salary structure, you're going to see base compensations go down a bit and variables actually go up. People say, hey, prove it. And that's one of the things that is definitely been happening as we're seeing the economy shift. People are going in with the old expectation when we were grow at all costs. It's like, oh, my last job I was at whatever. And they're saying, yeah, well, that's not where we're at for your base. And they're saying, but if you want to prove it, we'll give you more upside. Saying, and we're definitely seeing marketers more and more getting tied directly to revenue, which is also somewhat of a new thing. Pipeline used to be big and such, but now it's direct to revenue, which, the big push against that was, well, I'm not in sales, but when the team works in unity in concert together, the outcome is kind of obvious. And that's the whole reason for go-to-market, right? That unification, that clarity, alignment, and team. When that's done right, you see the outcome. So revenue is a big component, and variables are become bigger. I've seen crazy variable aspects that give people way more actual take-home dollars as long as they can hit the metric.
Okay. And that's something most marketers don't think about. You don't think about two things. You don't think about your own variable comp, which, by the way, every sales rep out there does. Like, that is huge. Most marketers think about base, and most sales reps think about variable, all right, because I want to succeed. So if you want to get the variable, boys and girls, you got to be better at the core skills. You got to be better at a diagnostic. You got to be a better analyst. You got to be better accountant. You got to be better data scientists, so that you can then figure out, as Sangram said, the right go-to-market plan. All of this is growth. I bet you thought when you joined this webinar, we were talking about growth as in major dollars and bells and whistles and marching bands. No, we're growing you. We're going to turn you into a better marketer, which is why we said the skills you develop at a downturn then come back to be, reaped over and over again when all of a sudden times are good and they give you a whole bunch more money and a whole bunch more people. Those raw skills keep on playing. Now, I want to go back to the budget conversation, guys. I'm always thinking, because I've been through enough of these, how can I maximize my budget and my bandwidth, which is usually a combination of I've lost people. I remember roughly around 2000, when the dot-com crash happened, the boys and girls, that was just after about 2000, 2001. I had just taken a job in LA and I had 24 people working for me. 3 years later, I had one person and myself on that team. And the company actually did well and grew. And I'm not saying you should prepare for that, but that is the reality. So we're going to get a lot of pressure. We as marketers, more than anybody else, I firmly believe, are really pushed hard to conserve cash and cut program spend, less so people. But ultimately, after there's only so much program you can cut, then you have to go to people. And it's really hard for us to argue against it because we know the company's bleeding cash. We know we want to survive. How do we protect our budget? Sangram, how have you protected your budget when that's happened?
Well, the question is, do you even have your own budget? A lot of times it's no longer your budget. The budget comes down from above, which is your CFO or somebody just monkeyed up the spreadsheet and you said, okay, here's your budget, and it's really not your budget. I've been in rooms where I've been told, okay, X dollars out of your budget is gone. Like, so figure it out. Or next quarter, you're not going to spend any of that. You're going to spend 10% of it. So many times it's not even your budget, which is why it goes full circle back to the conversation that you should never be on the receiving end. You should be part of the process. 99% of the CMOs or leaders in marketing, they're on the receiving end of, they get budget when the sales number goes up and the budget gets cut when the revenue number goes down. It's how the cycle works. But if you know your CFO and if you have that relationship, they are actually having that conversation up front with you. And then you get to finagle a few things like, okay, well, what if we did this versus that? What if I have a little bit of headcount pause and actually did program spend cut? And next quarter, maybe I can change the program spend and get back the new headcount that I wanted last quarter, and I'll do. That's a negotiation. That's a negotiation skill that you need to develop as a marketer. It's hard to do it when all of a sudden, newsflash, it's down, you need to cut budget, and you're like, okay, now my job is to go and cut budget. So thankfully, after being there a couple of times, I've learned my lesson and I'm way ahead of it. So I would go and talk to the CFO ahead of time, like, all right, I know next quarter is going to be tough. I see the pipeline, or I see the market, or I see whatever. I know that the market is changing and it's going to be tight. Let's talk about this right now. That's the job of marketer.
One thing to add real quick, Daryl, I'm going to pump you here because the one thing is, though, you can't do that if you don't know your numbers. So back to what Daryl said, you have to know your numbers.
Took my thunder away, Judd. Way to go. Because I was going to go there. I was all cocky. But what Judd said. So what did they just said? They said, if you're part of the relationships, and we said, we know across, we know up. If we're part of those relationships, then we're invited to be part of the process. And the second part there was, now you negotiate. We haven't even talked about that, right? Okay, guys, do you negotiate with your vendors? By the way, we haven't even talked about that. You want to save your money? Go negotiate or renegotiate with your vendors and your tech stack and everything else, because now's the time to do it. And you can do it. Trust me on this one. But you negotiate. But how do you negotiate? From a position of strength. And how do you have that strength? As Judd said, by knowing your numbers. Here's the one common theme I've got in every single freaking job ever. Daryl, you can have unlimited cash if you can show for me a positive ROI. You want $1 million a month of pay-per-click and it's going to bring me back, 1.1 million or more? There's no limits on how much cash I will give you. All right. So don't we can do that, folks, if you know your numbers, right? So you got to be in the data, in the weeds with the CRM. You got to build it back up to those top level KPIs so you can defend it and you can negotiate it. That's huge. All right. Let's bring this back full circle. Judd, this is your moment to shine after stealing my limelight there a minute ago. So I'm still giving it to you because I'm generous that way.
Of course.
All of this, I say, is a silver lining for your career, because if I go through this and I then update my CV or update my LinkedIn profile with all of these lessons learned, I have become a data scientist. I have become a financial wizard. I have become a networking machine. I am Mr. or Miss Relationship. I can hang with the masses. I can hang with those who are just starting out. And I can map it all together in a go-to-market framework to achieve our company goals. And I can conserve cash and I can grow efficiently. If I can put all of that on my LinkedIn profile, what does that mean to someone like you who's looking at a short list of candidates for that next kick-ass big job?
You are top of the list by far. It really is that simple. All of those components make for great leaders. There's other components of leadership too, but if you want to kill it in that leadership marketing role, all of those components are going to make you stand out from the rest dramatically. So it really is that simple. Those are all the components. And quite honestly, if you're doing all those things, your network is probably throwing you in front of opportunities on a regular, because you are a standout, shortlisted person that everybody wants to get their hands on.
So let me ask the second part of that question. The question. How many LinkedIn profiles do you see doing a good job of conveying that experience and those accomplishments?
Very few.
Wow. Did I mention, folks, Peak Community? Just throwing it out there. It's a great place to go and learn from each other so you don't have these mistakes. All right, folks, we're kind of getting to the tail end of the whole idea of how you can physically grow in an uncertain economy. We've given you a lot. A, have you followed Sangram and Judd on LinkedIn while we've been having this conversation? If you haven't, I will challenge you and say you're already starting behind the eight ball, because these are people who are rocking the world. They're really connected. We talked about relationships. We talked about networks. Get off your asses, and connect with them. Second, have you gone to Peak Community? Because if you haven't, you need your network. You need to go to a safe place that you can ask these hard questions, especially in a tough economy. So get that invite by finding somebody you know who's connected to the LinkedIn, the Peak Community. Hint, connect with me. I could probably hook you up. Those are all really big things. If you do this, you're going to rock it. Part of this is making sure that you ditch poor performing social media campaigns. We did a webinar about this recently, a couple quarters ago. We got a link here. That expertise we teach you there applies now, because remember, it's conserving cash and growing efficiently. Finally, we have another white paper we want to offer up to you here. Organic social media. It's all growing up. What are your top channels? Remember, we talked about getting granular with those channels. What are the right channels that are working for me? Organic social, boys and girls, doesn't cost a whole hell of a lot, but it's massive. Remember what we said the number one investment channel was from 17, according to HubSpot, who interviewed 400 marketers? Social media. That's organic social. The cost is nothing. We want to conserve cash. You need to get the white paper. Get smart. Your chance to grow right now is all here. It's in the community, it's in the content, and it's in people like you see right here with Sangram and Judd. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time today. Folks, my name's Daryl. I'm with Agorapulse. You can check us out at agorapulse.com. Have I mentioned we have a killer social media management platform? You can get a free trial. Check it out. In the meantime, more great resources online at agorapulse.com. We'll talk to you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, guys.